Hi everyone, we'll just give other participants a chance to join us, and then we'll get underway with the webinar. Just give everyone another 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll get underway. Okay, welcome everyone to this New Zealand chapter ACRS event. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to give a warm welcome to our 4 panellists today, who will be sharing their thoughts and reviews of the Australasian College of Road Safety Conference that was held in Christchurch nearly 2 months ago. That time's gone very quickly. So first of all, we'll have Melanie Mewison and Mike Smith from Stantec. Then we'll transition across to my colleague Shane Turner from Abley, and then hand over to Hamish Mackey from Mackey Research and Consulting. Then at the end, we'll have an opportunity for all 4 panelists to come back together to answer any questions that you may have. So if you do have a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Pop your question in there. There is an opportunity to upvote questions that you like, so please do that if that's of interest. And to make it helpful and easy for me, if you have a question for a particular panelist, can you please start your question with question for Melanie, question for Hamish, whoever it may be. So without further ado, then I will hand over to Melanie, and she'll start. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everyone. I will share my screen and get this presentation running. So hopefully you can see that now in full presentation mode. Is that correct, Paul?
No, it's just still showing in that slideshow mode, not full presentation at the moment, Mel.
Okay. Try that again. It did work before. Sorry, everyone.
It did work before, yeah.
Is that any better?
No.
No. Apologies. I'll stop sharing, and we'll try that.
Take 2.
Take 2. Yeah. Okay. I know what I'll do. Apologies, everyone. Just the joys of these. That all worked 5 minutes ago, I promise. And that, right. That's, you're just still getting the
same as before. That's fine. I think maybe if you just minimize over to the side there, and we'll just take the presentation in that format. That'll be fine, Mel.
Yep, sorry. Okay, I'll just try that again. I don't have much in the way of slides, so look, it should be easy to run through. So look, hi everyone, welcome, and I won't speak for too long, but I thought just give you some insights from sort of my viewpoint going to the conference. It was fantastic. Outturn of number of people having, since post-COVID, and seeing sort of 400 odd, was it 470 odd people there in person, and another couple of hundred people online participating in probably what was the largest road safety conference in Australasia ever, which was fantastic to be part of. And it was just really good to see people in person that we haven't seen in probably 2 or 3 years. As you will have guessed, a lot of the presentations were on speed management, which is very topical here in New Zealand within the rule having been released this year, and safe systems. And I suppose after about day 2, I think I got a little bit of speed management and safe systems fatigue, which I think some of the other delegates found too. But I suppose that when people were probably putting in their abstracts, that they were key areas that obviously everyone was interested in. So just felt that there was a little bit of repetition in some of the presentations we did see, but they were all very good, high quality, and certainly gave us a lot of food for thought. I suppose one of the areas that I did enjoy sort of the presentations was around the regional road safety. I do a lot of work in remote rural areas, and sort of been able to connect with people who are working in similar areas in New Zealand and Australia was great in that respect, because I think there's a lot of focus around urban areas because that's where the bulk of the population are, but we still have to maintain our roads and keep them safe for the rural networks, and and it's actually helping with our primary produce, our agriculture, and where our economy, the backstay of our economy starts really with our farmers, our forestry, and making sure that we've got those roads well maintained and safe for them to use to get their produce and products to market. One of the other areas that I have a lot of interest in is around mobile phone usage, digital billboards, and so the session around distraction fatigue and stress sessions, that was very topical for me. I think mobile phone usage has been quite a hot topic, and obviously with the introduction of the safety cameras that Waka Kotahi are going to be administering, and the trial that's happened recently around looking at mobile phone usage, that this is something that we do need to sort of look at in more detail. One of the speakers, Verity Truelove from the University of Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, sorry, and she was talking about the differences between urban and rural, and their study on mobile phone usage, and in rural areas, probably say in Australia where there's less reception in the outback, people don't have their mobile phones in their laps. They're not getting the distractions, whereas in urban areas, everyone's highly connected. You've got that sort of mobile coverage. And it comes down to, whether your occupations rely on it or not. And if you're, courier driver and you're constantly sort of on your phone wanting to know where you need to go next, yes, you're going to be using it while you're driving. So it's those sorts of things that sort of struck a chord with me. One of the other ones was the digital billboard session from Adam Wilmot from GHD in Perth, talked about, given that Mike and I work in a building that overlooks an intersection with 10 digital billboards and counting at the moment, I suppose we sort of despair in terms of what's the impact on road safety, and there's not a lot of data there around that at the moment here in New Zealand. It's not much in our CAS database, so it's probably something that we want to pursue a bit more. There's a lot of research overseas that we're following up with. One could argue that in an urban area that digital billboards is just another function, and it's just something that's going to be there. There's a lot of other things that can distract drivers in that urban area, but I still feel that even as a driver, I can get distracted, so other people must be getting distracted too. So I think that those are good key areas that really interested me. General themes from the conference, it's not just about roads and the movement of vehicles, it's really about the safe movement of people and getting in all modes, getting people to their destination in the safest way, whether it's urban, rural, whether they're walking, cycling, on public transport. And there was a real sort of theme around that. As I've mentioned before, valuable meeting people that we haven't seen in a while, but also getting I'm an engineer. I come from my little engineering world, and great to actually see how many other professions are involved in road safety, and being able to talk to some very interesting people in human behaviour space, enforcement agencies, driving instructors. It takes a system. It's a whole system and a whole group of different people and professions to really get us to where we want to go. Merging issues. I suppose I've struggled myself with how do we link road safety with climate change. The conference certainly helped me with making that very clear. We had a very good thought-provoking session around climate change and carbon zero, and then Susan Crumdyke with her transition engineering presentation later in the day just really reinforced that. I suppose key messages was really we can't electrify ourselves out of climate change. We have to be looking at other modes. We have to be getting people into active modes, public transport, and obviously that results in less carbon emissions, positive health outcomes, improved amenity on surrounding streets, and and that creates a safer environment for everyone. And the speed management falls into that too, because of course with lower speeds, less carbon emissions, and we all know that people have a higher survivability rate if traffic is travelling at lower speeds. So just to end, in terms of what we can do differently, and we all know this, but it's a multidisciplinary approach that we need to deliver the road safety outcomes. We need to utilise that sort of diverse group of skills and experience. I think for me, it's opened my eyes up to the people that we need to be bringing into projects going forward. I have joked that I don't need a civil engineering degree, I need a psychology degree to do my job some days. And it's really not a joke anymore, because you certainly do, because we're dealing with people and we're dealing with behaviours. And so I suppose it's about getting out of our own sort of comfort areas and sort of seeing it as a wider system that we participate in as practitioners. But so something else that really came out of it, and going back to the comment on safe systems, a lot of discussion on safe systems and how we can design better roundabouts and that sort of thing. But for the areas where there's a lot of road networks where we're not going to have funding for transformational projects or capital projects. So what are we going to do with those bits of road that we can't do much on? So we can do speed management. We can, tidy a few bits and pieces up under low cost, low risk, the old minor safety improvements program. But we have to, the key thing for me, from someone who has come from a network management background a long time ago, is what are we doing to maintain our networks to actually provide a safe, an environment that gives people the right messages at the right time. Yes, we know it's not perfect. It's not something that we want to we want to accept, but it is something that we need to look at. So I suppose this is I suppose the segue into Mike Smith's presentation, where he's going to talk about that a little bit more. But thank you, everyone, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mel, and perfect transition across to Mike now. So Mike, do you want to have a go at sharing your screen, and I'll hand the presentation over to you.
Thanks, Paul. So that should be coming up, sharing now.
Yep, you're onto it. All good.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks to Mel. There was a really good summary of what was actually happening at the conference and some of the key takes that we had. I think the key thing for me was around how do we look at our networks and look at the safe system style treatments, but also look at what we've already got. So thank you, Mel, for leading it in. Those that know me, what I call the last line of defense, or the belts and braces. So apologies for those who have sat through this before, but I still maintain that this is a vital element that we haven't covered. So let's start. 6th of March, 2100 hours, the motorcyclist suffered fatal injuries when they impacted with a bridge end, and it's indicated by the arrow there. This is the rural collector road, and the system failed the driver of the vehicle. So as rural collector road, we have a required standard for delineation and guidance and everything else, but unfortunately, it just wasn't there. We all know about Vision Zero, and the crux of that is a safe system is well engineered. I've added the emphasis, maintained and operated. Now, we have engineered and operated, but what we're finding is that the maintained element is not that good. Throughout the conference, I guess I was a little bit dismayed that in 3 days of conference, there was a exceptional amount of conversation around transformational projects. But I think there's only one other paper which was dealing with maintaining what you already have. And as Mel said, we've got extensive parts of the network where there will not be any transformational projects at this stage, whether they be state highway or local road. And yet we still, the crashes are still occurring. We've still got to put a higher level of emphasis into what we've got there. Don't read the finer text. This is just relating to signs and delineation and everything else. Got to be visible to road users, be maintained in good repair. These are all out of our guiding documents. Highway maintenance guides, the traffic control devices rule, traffic control devices manual. This is nothing new. This is written into what we already have. What we've found often is that the contracted intent is what was on the left-hand side there. That is a well-maintained sign, clear, visible. But for whatever reasons in those contracts, we end up with what's actually happening on the right-hand side there. These photos are actually taken from some of our road networks. They're not doctored in any way. And these are some of the signs are actually sitting on local and state highway roads. So if we're not giving the right message at the right time, what advantages the driver actually got? So we identified that there were some issues around. What we were asked to do by Waka Kotahi was to look at a section of highway and actually look at the sign performance using their operational performance measures, but also looking at the traffic control devices rule requirements. And as you can see there, at 160 metres, which is what the hybrid OPM is, 64% of those signs failed. The 120 metres observation distance, which is the TCDR requirement and the NOC contract requirement, 60% failed. And this keeps going. 100 metre observation, 55%, and then 75 metre observation, which is really half of what it should be, was still up into only 30-something%. So this is taken on a live 300-kilometre section of state highway, both directions. So the performance isn't good. So identifying that there were some sign issues, what we did is we went back and had a look at the network crash study for a section of roads, highways and local roads in the same geographic area. Don't look at the detail, look at the shape. You'll see what we had for local roads on the top and state highways on the bottom. If we look at fatal, serious, minor injury and non-injury, the trends were generally going in the same direction. The drop at the tail at the bottom end is what we're all should be taking awareness of when we're doing crash studies, is that 2019 COVID kicked in. So we had greatly reduced volumes on the roads, so the crash volumes are down. Yet when we're still doing 5-year studies now, we still seem to be incorporating 2019 to 21, 22, yet those values have been dropped down. They're slowly climbing back out. You can see some of the driver-only factors sitting in the middle there. Again, some commonality around those factors. And the right-hand side there predominantly crashes mid-block. So drilling down through that, what we had was 40% of those crashes were in dark, but when we considered dark and low light, that figure rose to 70. 75% of them were lost control off-road, and 75% were single vehicle. So what we have is a clear observation in here that dark, lost control off-road, single vehicle. The correlation here is that the drivers just aren't getting the message and the guidance that they require on these roads. If we look at flatline budget deferrals, under pavement, we contain the style of treatment that we put in play right through down to a waterproofing seal to hold that pavement for longer. Likewise with top surfacing. With top surfacing, we've got a number of treatment options that we can do to hold that top surface a little bit longer, so we can defer that budget or that maintenance cost out and then go from there. But when it comes to signs, delineations, guidance, we have one option, that is to clean or replace. If we don't do clean and replace, we have no other option below it. So often what I call the black hole. If we don't clean and replace these signs, then the guidance and the delineation for the driver, the awareness of what's happening in front of them disappears. I did a bit of private research based around some of the material, some of the issues that we saw. This is a series of slides or series of photos that were taken daytime. This is what the road looks like in daytime, taken from the same viewpoint, same camera, same settings, what it would look like in the bottom left there for nighttime. And then as part of the study, what I did is I cleaned half the sign and put a brand new reflective panel underneath it that was of the same sign type as the main sign. And as you can see in those photos, what looks good in the daytime, which is what appears to be the bulk of the observations now done on a lot of our maintenance contracts. Had we done the nighttime inspections and been aware of the factors, we would have noticed that these signs just aren't visible. So the driver's not getting the message. Similarly, if we'd been out there and we'd actually cleaned them, we'd have actually recognized that even just simple active cleaning is going to make things a little bit better. As part of that study, I looked at a number of different sign types over a portioned network. And this is really just looking at the results. So the orange is what the average was. It was 5 to 7 readings over the sign face. The average value is in the orange. The average value, if I cleaned the sign, is in the green. The telling piece here is the red line is what a new reflective panel of that sign, reflective property. So we are 1/10 of the performance value of those signs. So what I do is I talk about the Road Safety Collective, and that is the delineation lines and signs. They all piece together to give driver the view along the road. if we have a failing of one of those three elements, we still have the other two, which are supportive to give that, that guidance through. But again, with over 30 years between Mel and myself, driving around networks doing nighttime inspections, what we're finding is there's a failing on all of those elements, so delineation lines and signs. So back to basics. What do we do? As I said, this is based around decades of actually doing daytime, nighttime side road inspections. The first thing I'll say is that daytime, nighttime, and side road inspections have generally fallen completely away from any of our maintenance contracts. What we end up in by default is an asset inspection, and that is to say that that sign is where it says it's going to be, and that's about as far as it goes. But what we do know is that if we use the back to basics, it's not only the sign or the delineation or guidance that's there, it's what's not there. It's the pieces of information missing, the incorrectly located signs, the poor quality of the signs. That is the crux of doing the inspections. Also, we have to view the road as a lay driver. Have a technical lens, but look at it in the context as the driver getting the right message at the right time for them to do the right thing. As I say at the bottom there, the Houdini factor, it's what's not there is just as important as what is. So just in closing, there's a short video that should be running. It really does amplify for me the need for regular maintenance. That we need to get out there and talk to our maintenance teams. We need to talk to our network operators. We need to talk to our contractors that this is an important part of road safety. It is what's going to hold the bulk of our network because we can't do transformational type projects. And if we don't do this, then we're not setting the scene correctly for the motorist. And that's more from me, Paul.
Terrific. Thanks, Mike. I'm very glad you gave that presentation today. I missed that one at the conference as I was running around doing many other different things, but thank you so much. Just a reminder to pop your questions into the Q&A box down the bottom there and to upvote any of those questions that are asked. Right, I'll hand over now to Shane, and Shane can provide his review and thoughts on the conference and the new things that we need to be thinking about as an industry. Over to you, Shane.
Thanks, Paul. Share my screen. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to give some takeaways that I got out of the conference, and I will be finishing by talking about the gig economy. So that's why I've used the term takeaways. So I was chair of the scientific committee, so heavily involved in putting the preliminary program together and also selecting the papers for the main program. And one of the key things we wanted to do at the conference was really advance the conversation around road safety as it relates to climate change and to making our streets safer for people, putting people first. So that was a key area that we wanted to work in. And when we discussed it with our Australian friends from the college, they also said that New Zealand, they think was leading in this area, particularly the climate change, but also in terms of how our cities are being transformed. So we wanted to highlight that and illustrate that in the conference, and I think we did a good job at doing that. So I've just taken some slides from a LinkedIn post that Chris Durwich did on a summary of the conference, which I thought was really good. Not so focused around the pure road safety stuff, but the link between road safety and climate action, healthy cities, and economic prosperity. In terms of the climate change and transport, we also heard from Rod, Simon, and Susan in that Thursday morning session, a lot of information about climate change as it links to transport. But what we do take away from that is that going forward, we're going to, particularly if you listen to Susan, we're going to need to reduce the number of trips we make, and working from home, it's occurred during the pandemic, has obviously changed the way we work, and a lot more people are working from home. But not just in terms of those work trips, but in our general trips, we're going to have to live maybe more simply going forward to try and reverse the impact on climate and reduce the length of our trips. So going forward, our cities should be better planned, that we live closer to where we work, more mixed use developments, that type of thing, and also changing transport mode we use. And I think particularly pushing people onto active forms of transport, walking and cycling, is going to increase. And we know that those road user types are vulnerable in the current transport system. And so we need to even increase the amount of efforts that are going into making it safer to walk and cycle in our cities. And even with public transport, there's usually quite a big walking component to most people's public transport trips, both in cities and in the outskirts of cities when they're boarding buses. But ultimately, we want a safe road network in our cities that is where we don't have vulnerable road users, or very few vulnerable road users, because then we have a low risk of death and serious injury. We also want to create healthy, livable cities, ones that are connected, not just by car, but connected through active modes. That's why we're building lots of cycleways and trying to make areas much more safe for walking. Promote placemaking. So there were a couple of papers on movement and place, and obviously more safe walking and cycling. And one key area that I like to promote, which is that we should try and build exercise into our daily commuting. Because if you're not doing anything else, at least cycling to work or walking to work does give you some fitness in each day, even if you don't, as I say, go to the gym. And I also picked up from Wakatari in the last session, talking about speed management principles, these 4 different areas. But it's really important in terms of the community's well-being that we have safer speeds and we provide equitable access. So that's quite a major area they're talking about around safe system in the US. US has really only just formally adopted safe system at a federal level. And they're talking about equity access, not just in terms of various races in their population, but also for disabled and different types of people that we need to provide a safe road network for. There were some really awesome posters. So the posters are getting better and better every year. Like the last conference, which was virtual, we had some really awesome posters that were put together from Monash University. Again, this year, there were some really awesome ones that we could see in person, obviously, unless you were obviously virtually attending. But there were some really good posters around slower urban speeds and the importance of those. A couple from Auckland around safer urban residential streets. And, safe speed is really important in terms of pedestrians, particularly where they have to cross the road network. And of course, the link in terms of safe speed to healthy, livable and inclusive neighbourhoods, which I've just sort of touched on. So that was from Christchurch City. So a couple of Auckland posters and one from Christchurch. So they're very much gearing up to making our communities safer, or streets in our urban areas safer to walk and cycle. And there was a couple of other awesome posters. These ones are from Christchurch City. So one that looked at equity, which I just talked about before. So being able to provide access and safe access, safe mobility for all road user types. And then of course, the importance of really making it safe for children to access their schools by walking and cycling. And that's not just at the front gate, but it's really important that our neighbourhoods, the suburban neighbourhoods, are safe as well, with safe crossing places and safer speeds. So some really awesome posters. And just sort of going to finish off talking about the gig economy. So there was a workshop on the gig economy, which I was listening to after the conference. I didn't manage to get to that at the conference. It was a virtual workshop. But why I'm highlighting this is that this is really just showing us what's happening with the population. We're all under pressure, but these gig economy workers are under more pressure than anyone else because they've got delivery times. They face also violence if they're on bikes, because particularly in Australia, where a lot of this research was from, if you're on a bike, you get road rage from car drivers. they have some quite big risks. Like when we were working recently in Sydney on King Streets in Newtown, we saw a lot of these, this was a couple of years ago, a lot of these gig economy or these delivery people. And we found out actually that a lot of them are students from the University of Sydney. Many of them are overseas students, and some of them have never ridden a bike, and then are given a powered bike or a motorbike to do their deliveries on. So had very little training or knowledge, and we're under quite a lot of time pressure. So that's a real concern, that they're under that amount of pressure and don't have the skills necessary. And so obviously lack of experience is a high factor in crash risk. Just that pressure to make your deliveries or a whole lot of deliveries in an hour is likely to increase mistakes that people make when they're under pressure, and fatigue also, because sometimes they're working really long hours to make enough money to live, because sometimes their hourly rate is below the minimum wage. So, but I just want to highlight the point that they're at the tip of the iceberg. These are the delivery drivers that are under that pressure, but a lot of people are under pressure nowadays to fit more into their days, and that has to have an impact on safety, because people are more likely to make mistakes if they're under pressure. And I don't think we talk about this enough. So anyway, I got that from my view of the gig economy virtual seminar. So that's all I have, but I'll hand it back to you now, Paul. Hopefully it's been interesting.
It certainly has. Thank you, Shane. That's fantastic and complementing the other presentations nicely. Now, our last panelist of the day is Hamish Mackey. So we'll hand over to Hamish, and Hamish will share his thoughts on the conference. Over to you, Hamish.
Kia ora tātou. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm actually coming to you from my back porch, a working from home issue related to being locked out of the house. So I don't have any slides, but I've got a few reflections for you. Just the other thing, if my battery dies in my phone, just know that's happened and carry on. So I guess we were there. I mean, firstly, it was just fantastic to be involved with the conference and be there. It was after so long, just so great to catch up with colleagues from New Zealand and Australia and just share things face to face, have those really meaty, informal conversations. So, you know, there's challenges with hybrid conferences and online conferences. They've certainly got their place. But I just really valued the face-to-face contact and meeting up with old colleagues and new. We were there presenting a bunch of things, myself and my team, related with building on from Shane's comment. We're doing some work for a Waka Kotahi research project looking at the gig economy and road safety. So yeah, a lot of what Shane's saying is very important, and certainly we're finding that in our research. So we were helping with that symposium. We were also presenting some work looking at a safe system analysis of driving for work. We also have just finished a traffic control devices trial of Dragon's Teeth, and we presented that work. And then finally, Ali and our team was talking about our work with Waka Kotahi to help evaluate the Streets for People program. So that was all the stuff that we were really focused on. But there was other things that I thought were very important that struck me as well. An overall theme that struck me was this sort of reflection that it seems that perhaps in road safety, there's been a bit of a silo that we're working in. And also, you know, we've justifiably got some very narrow goals to drive down those deaths and serious injuries. But it struck me that actually, and this is, I think, thinking that's been happening for a while, that we can be a bit broader in our goals. We've got other things to consider, wider goals like mode shift, like sustainability, emissions reduction. And in some ways, these shouldn't be extra burdens. They should be levers, which help us to get some of our road safety goals, for example, lower speeds over the line. So it seems to me we need to be a lot smarter about, you know, collecting up all these benefits and levers and putting them together for a bigger case for these things. The other thing, and I was sort of involved with the Q&A for the Indigenous road safety stream, and I thought that was an excellent stream. You know, some really interesting and important points about Māori and road safety, about First Nations peoples and road safety. And I think this is something that I think Waka Kotahi is making some great strides on. There's a lot more to do, both how we engage with and work with Māori, but actually how we deliver and respond to Māori and road safety. So I was very pleased to see that stream and help with it. An excellent initiative, and it'd be good to see more of that. And just the other thing, I guess, related to that, and these broader goals for road safety is this idea of health benefits. And Shane mentioned the physical activity, and I think we can't again dissociate this idea of other societal goals. And sometimes in other places we talk about health and safety, and what about the health that comes with the safety? So I think that's another important point. Just another thing that struck me was it seems we know a lot about the what we need to be doing. A lot of the conversation was talking about how and the challenges of the how, and the issues of leadership, where those leadership points need to be in the system, and that seems to segue into a conversation about social license. And I heard sometimes in the conference, sort of leaders saying, well, we need the social license before we can do anything. But then there's this counter argument that we actually have to develop social license and build up social license and just be a bit more accurate and evidence-based and clear about what that social license actually is, and not just the loud squeaky wheels. So I think that's a really important point we need to keep working on. And then just the final sort of overall thing, and this is not something I've been particularly involved with, but I can see increasingly a lot of others are, is this idea of road safety and not in the big places. There's been a lot of road safety effort in developed countries and cities, and we heard a lot of increasing amounts about developing countries, where we know that globally some of the biggest road safety burdens actually are. But I think, as Melanie mentioned, that idea of road safety in remote areas where you don't have those big infrastructure, big budgets and big planning systems necessarily to lean on. So it struck me that that's an important continuing area as well. So that's all from me, and I'll hand it back to you, Paul. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Hamish. And hopefully you're not locked out of the house for too long, although it looks like it's a relatively nice day here in Auckland at the moment. Look, thank you, Mel, Mike, Shane, and Hamish for sharing your reflections on the conference. We do have some questions coming in, so I'll put those to the panel. So if the panelists can all switch their videos back on, and then we'll take the questions. So question for you, Mike, from Glenn. Do you have any sense of how much improved maintenance can reduce crash or injury rates compared with, say, other low volume network tools like reducing speed limits?
Oh, I always get the difficult question first. Thanks, Glenn. Look, it's really interesting, and I'll bow to Shane's knowledge here on crash reduction factors as well. What I do know is that when we look at a road network, we don't see an immediate benefit because it takes time to implement across networks. So if you were to take a network now and start doing a staged approach, it may take up to 5 years to cover a network. What I do know is that we have undertaken some studies on some road networks looking at benefit cost, and the benefit cost ratio of doing sign improvements, signs, lines, markings are in the BC of 20 plus. So it's got a massive rate of return on it. But yeah, I'll bow to Shane for the hard figures.
Thanks, Mike. There's plenty of questions here, many of which are put to you, but I've got a couple of questions. I might just jump in between the ones that have been asked. So why is it that our roads and infrastructure are so poorly maintained, and is this getting worse?
I'll answer the second part of the question first. Yes, it is getting worse. Why is it poorly maintained? I think part of that is a factor of falling budgets. So we're looking at global reduction in budget for maintenance, which unfortunately is going across what I call the belts and braces items. If we were to stand true to the road safety realm, we would say signs, lines, markings should be increased, not decreased, because that is our baseline of defence on the network. I think too, there's been, this is my personal view, we've had trials of multiple maintenance contract types, and through that, it's the lowest price conforming tenders, and then we've also had the issue that our knowledgeable staff have gone. We rely a lot on general maintenance staff coming in from hire companies and things like that.
Thanks, Mike. So I think there's probably a bit of a challenge for us as an industry and the people that have been around it for a while to be asking for better outcomes in those spaces. There's no point putting on terrific infrastructure onto roads if it's then just left to fall into a state of disrepair where it could actually end up becoming more of a hazard than a safety asset itself. So I think there's some work to be done there.
Yeah,
question, another one for you, which is a question from Simon about thermoplastic line markings. So why is it that I guess we just tend to spray the paint everywhere as opposed to using thermoplastic, which has far better longevity and retroreflective properties? Is it just a matter of cost?
Cost is certainly a big factor in the application of thermoplastic. A lot of our maintenance contracts, especially if we start talking about the more rural elements, the justification, I think, for thermoplastic is greatly reduced. But if it's in our urban environment where we have a lot of asphaltic surfacing and things like that, I'm gobsmacked as well as to why we're not using more of the wet mark or thermoplastic style markings. There's so many benefits of it. We also know the disbenefits of just conventional paint work is that where we change lane configurations, even on seal, black them out, wet road conditions, dark road conditions, we end up with multiple lines. So yeah, I'd like to say that we would progress across to thermoplastics for certainly a lot of our urban environment, but I don't think it would hold true for the bulk of our rural environment.
Thanks, Mike. And this one, not necessarily directed at you, so any of our panelists could answer this one, but what about, it's a question from Brian Sherritt. Surely one of the other key maintenance elements that impacts on road safety is skid resistance. How are we doing in New Zealand and could we do better?
Well, what do you want to go, Mike?
No, you go, Mel.
No. Well, I mean, having been on network contracts, yes, that is somewhere that in the area that we can influence, and I know it does happen. But I'm not sure whether we're getting the impact that we need on in those areas, and getting the safety engineers involved in that skid resistance program and helping identify those areas. It's sort of an ongoing sort of issue that we do have with, I suppose, the role of safety engineers on networks and making sure that they are involved, because the skid resistance just comes back to being just a pavement solution. And so the asset engineer will go out and assess it and might not involve the safety engineer in that discussion.
Yeah, and just adding to what Mel said, skid resistance is one of a multiple number of factors that come into play. In my role of doing fatal and serious crash investigations, what we find is that skid resistance is certainly a factor, but we also have the geometry of the road, where we have loss of control on curve type crashes. We have split supers because it's basically been a donkey track that's been sealed. So we have lower super elevation on the outside of the curve than the inside. It's good grip going one direction. We just need a minimal drop in scrim or skid resistance on the outside, and then wet road crashes become a dominant factor. And then I think historically there's been a lot of work done around the Pollock value performance of chip seals. But how often do we actually go out there and actually start looking at that and relate it to geometry and curve advisory and all the rest? So I think it's one of many factors, but yes, I do believe that skid resistance has been dropping away.
Thanks, Mike. And look, final question that's in the Q&A at the moment is from Glenn Curry. And I think it's largely picking up on some comments that Mel made and Hamish made, and how it was just fantastic to be at a conference face-to-face, reconnecting with industry colleagues and others that we've had things to do with in the past, and making expanding our own networks as well, meeting new people, and just the breadth of people that are involved in the road safety industry. But even though we've got human factors and enforcement people and others that might be involved in, say, child seats and engineers, it tends to be that everyone sort of gravitates to their own sort of stream. So question from Glenn, I think it's a great one. What could we do better at the conference to encourage that intermingling of attendance in sessions to better learn from each other?
Well, I obviously helped put the program together, and I remember in some of the sessions, like the speed management, we did have a human factors expert, not just engineers talking. So that was quite interesting to have someone with a different perspective rather than put them in the human factors stream. But obviously, with the recordings being available for 6 months after the conference, you can go and look at those other sessions you might not normally look at if you're really interested in the topic. So I think that's really good development now, having the recordings. The other thing we've talked about is potentially in that 6 month period, because obviously some people get really busy and they don't end up watching those videos, is to maybe do some webinars where we actually present some of the virtual and the parallel stream content on particular topics. And so if you miss them at the conference, you can come along and listen to a webinar, and that allows you to lock in a time into your diary to watch it, rather than think you've got 6 months and then 1 month before the deadline try and watch everything that you missed. So yeah, I think there's some good ideas there.
Thanks, Shane. Did anyone else wish to comment? Hamish?
Yeah, just another thing. It's a really good point, Glenn. One thing I often do at conferences is, when you get to a certain point, perhaps once you've done your presentation, I like going off to ones that I know nothing about, or it's an area that I'm completely have no expertise in. And I find it really interesting to see these different things. And I wonder if that sort of thing could be almost encouraged and formalized a bit. So, the MC or the program or something like that actually says, right, this is where you go to something that you know nothing about, or I mean, my background's in human factors, and a lot of our work is with engineers or with other people, and I guess we naturally have a sort of a complementary way of looking at the world, I suppose. But yeah, I just wonder if something like that, to actually encourage people to, I mean, you get various sort of slightly cheesy things sometimes, don't you, where you make people meet other people and, things like that. But it doesn't necessarily have to be like that, but perhaps something built into the program to make that happen. I don't know.
Yeah, excellent. I think it's a great idea, Hamish, that you've come up with there, and perhaps something that Shane and I can share with the organisers of the next event about encouraging attendance at a stream topic that they know nothing about. So look, just before we close today, firstly, I'd like to thank our 4 panellists, Mel, Mike, Shane and Hamish, for taking time out of your busy days to share your reflections and thoughts on the conference. And we covered a nice range of topics there, so thank you very much. Before we close, I will just put in a little promo for our next New Zealand chapter webinar, which is happening in 2 weeks' time on Tuesday, 6th of December. So that's on the safe system audit, and that will be covering off the new safe system audit guidelines that were released by Waka Kotahi last month. And our 3 presenters there are Jessica Rattray and James Hughes of Waka Kotahi, and Ken Bear of Safe System Solutions. So if you head to the Australasian of College page and head to the New Zealand chapter, you will find the Safe System Audit webinar event there, and you can register for that. So that's the same time, same place in a fortnight from today. So please do that. All right, that's it. I don't see that we've had any more Q&A come through. So thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everyone else who's attended online. There will be, it has been recorded, so it will be put up on the ACRS website, the recording, and I'll send out a note once that's made available so that you can watch it or share it with your colleagues. Thanks everyone, and we'll see you in a fortnight's time.